So, picture this. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, sipping what had to be my 10th cup of barely drinkable college coffee, when I noticed something that made me almost choke on it. I was staring at the lease agreement I'd signed for this new apartment in our little college town, right? And there, right there in black and white next to my name was Jake's. Jake. The one person from my high school years I had desperately tried to avoid at all costs. The guy with whom I had an ongoing rivalry that wasn't just mild trash talk but the full-on, eye-roll-inducing kind of back and forth that only high schoolers like us can pull off. I just sat there, blinking like a deer caught in headlights and asking myself silently, how the heck did this happen? Because, seriously, if someone had told me a month ago I'd be living with Jake sharing the same space, the same bathroom, even the same measly living room, I would have laughed so hard they'd probably have to call for medical assistance. But there it was, glaring at me from the page. Jake. And his scribbled signature mocked me right beneath mine, like some twisted joint venture I never signed up for. I mean, I knew we ended up going to the same college. It was small, so we didn't have much choice, but somehow I thought our rivalry would conveniently keep us buckled into opposite ends of campus life. Nope. Instead, our names were joined on a lease like a public declaration of forced cohabitation. At first, my brain raced through all the possible explanations. Was this some kind of prank? Had Jake slick talked the landlord into this? Does the landlord know about our history? I'm pretty sure someone sneaked in some secret clubhouse initiation involving this arrangement, and somehow I missed the memo. And then, just as I was about to text Jake with an expletive-laced, "What the hell is this?" my phone buzzed. It was Emily. She's a mutual friend, the kind who always seemed to exist in the background of our messy high school saga. The one person bizarrely cool enough to have been friends with both Jake and me without getting caught in the firing line. I knew Emily was involved somehow. The nerve of her, actually, to pull this stunt on us. But how deep was she in this? My gut told me that this wasn't just some careless mix-up. Nope, there was a plan behind locking us into this tiny apartment together. And if that wasn't enough to fill me with dread, just thinking about the fact that I'd have to, live with Jake for the entire school year practically sent me spiraling into what I could only guess was going to be an awkward, passive-aggressive nightmare. So yeah, that night was a mess. I sat there, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my worst high school rival was now, by some twisted fate, my roommate. And honestly, I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure: nothing about this was going to be easy. So, picture high school, a battlefield where Jake and I weren't just rivals. Let's just say we made the dictionary definition of competition look tame. Every game, every class, every dumb little contest turned into a showdown. We barely said more than a few sentences outside the necessary "hey" or "what's up" that felt more like social obligations than actual greetings. Honestly, it was exhausting. And yet, somehow, despite our mutual determination to avoid each other post-graduation, here we were, about to be forced to live together. College was supposed to be the fresh start, right? But our tiny little school town had exactly two good things going for it: the campus and cheap, affordable housing, which was admittedly rare enough to make us both desperate. My search for a place had been a race against time and money, just like I imagined Jake's was. Turns out Emily, our mutual friend who somehow straddled both our worlds without getting caught in our endless crossfire, had helpfully signed us both up on the same lease. And helpfully feels like the wrong word. I found out later that Emily had been the one talking to the landlord, Mr. Dunlop, the quirky old guy who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a black and white detective movie. He apparently liked Emily enough to believe her when she said having two mature, responsible students share the apartment was the best option. Problem was, neither of us knew a thing about the other's signed lease until the papers landed on my table that morning. I called Emily. She answered, sounding suspiciously chipper. "Oh, come on," she said with this quirky laugh. "It'll be great. You guys can finally squash whatever is going on. Back in high school, you two were like fire and gasoline, right? What better way to put it out than making you roommates?" I couldn't tell if she was genius or downright sadistic. She assured me she'd set some ground rules, like dividing chores and respecting personal space, but anyone who's ever shared a tiny apartment with a known enemy knows how fragile respect can be. The first few days felt like tiptoeing through a minefield. We barely spoke, mostly exchanging cold glances over the couch or avoiding eye contact in the kitchen like we were trying some silent competition of who could pretend the other didn't exist best. Jake once left a note stuck to the fridge that read simply, "Your turn to buy toilet paper," without a signature, like it was some anonymous threat. In response, I left a post-it on the coffee maker: "This thing is mine until further notice." It probably looked petty, but hey, I wasn't about to back down over kitchen territory. Curiously enough, though, it wasn't all bad. One night, the remote control accidentally went missing, and in the hunt to find it, we stumbled on a stack of DVDs, mostly old action flicks and cheesy sci-fi movies. Turns out, Jake was as into them as I was. For a few minutes, the walls between our rival camps let down their guard just a little. But that fragile détente shattered fast when my laptop went dark one morning and I had a big paper due. Jake claimed he hadn't touched it, but I found a cracked screen on his desk and the timing was suspicious. Emotions exploded. Accusations flew faster than I could keep up with, ending with a door slam so hard I thought it might shake the whole building. Just when I thought things couldn't get weirder, Emily popped by, beaming like she'd just delivered the punchline to a joke only she got. "You two are doing great," she declared, like we were some reality show contestants she was secretly rooting for. "And, there's a reason I pulled you into this. Bigger than just the lease." I blinked, waiting for her to spill whatever secret twist this ridiculous living situation had in store for us. The days that followed felt like living inside a soap opera script someone else wrote, except way more awkward and with significantly less glamour. Jake and I coexisted in this cramped apartment, navigating a minefield of petty grudges and unspoken rules. Our first morning crossed the line nowhere near zero drama. I found a post-it slapped on the bathroom mirror that said, "Try not to look like a tornado hit you during your 5-minute shower." Thanks, Jake. Charming, right? I stared at it for a solid minute, debating whether to rip it down or peel it off slowly as a power move. I settled on a very diplomatic, noted, scribbled under it. Breakfast was another battleground. The cereal shelves looked like a stock market crash, with most boxes half empty. On top of the fridge, Jake's ancient container of protein powder stared at me like it was daring me to touch it, so naturally, I did. A teaspoon accidentally spilled into my yogurt one morning, which he immediately noticed and cast me a death stare while munching toast with the solemnity of a monk. Our standoff over breakfast ingredients escalated through a series of passive-aggressive swaps. I'd take his last energy bar, he'd borrow my ketchup bottle. It was childish, sure, like 15-year-olds trapped in grown-up skin, but somehow felt fitting. Yet beneath all the tension, there were these weird little moments where Jake's walls slipped for a second or two. Like that night when the power went out, leaving us sitting in near darkness with only the faint glow of our phones. Normally, silence between us would have been suffocating. Instead, we started talking. Real talk about some dumb sci-fi series we both loved but were too embarrassed to admit back in school. He laughed at an inside joke I made, and for a second it was sort of okay living with him. Almost. But then the laptop incident happened, the big one that wiped my goodwill clean off the map. I'd stayed up late writing this paper, the one assignment all semester that really mattered. Next morning I booted up, and nothing. Black screen, dead, no blinking cursor, no sign of life. I was ready to blame my ancient laptop, but then I saw it crack spiderwebbing across the screen like some insect apocalypse had happened overnight. That's when I noticed the same cracks on a beaten-up laptop sitting on Jake's desk. The timing was suspicious, to say the least. I didn't even ask. I just stood there staring down Jake like he owed me the world. "Did you break it?" I finally managed. Jake threw his hands up, voice defensive. "No, I swear I didn't touch your laptop." "Right, sure." I voiced what I couldn't keep inside. "Seriously? You're saying your busted laptop is a coincidence? That this mess just happened on its own between you and me trying not to kill each other?" He slammed his fist against the table, eyes flashing. "Look, maybe if you were being so freaking intense, I wouldn't need to guess you're spying on me or some crap." And that was it. A line drawn deep enough to carve a canyon between us. I stormed out of the room, not sure if the door slammed louder than my temper or vice versa. For a while, the apartment felt colder than usual, less like home and more like a no man's land. Days passed with minimal communication, just enough to survive without exploding. Then Emily showed up, grinning like she was about to announce the winner of a twisted reality show. "You too," she said, waving both arms like this was the best thing she'd seen all week. Seriously, killing it with the roommate thing? And you know, there's a reason I set this whole thing in motion. It's not just about saving money or finding a place. I stared, eyebrows raised. "There's a reason?" She nodded, all mysterious and cryptic. "Let's just say this is bigger than your old rivalry. There's a plan. A sort of experiment? But you two are the stars." Figuratively speaking. Jake and I exchanged glances, both of us trying to decide whether she was crazy, a genius, or both. "What kind of plan?" I asked, dreading the answer but also the hint of curiosity gnawing at me. Emily smiled this mischievous smile like she'd be satisfied if we never stopped guessing. "One that might just make friends out of enemies." I blinked, caught somewhere between wanting to laugh and getting ready for whatever weird turn was coming next. Yeah. Just living with Jake was already stretching all the limits of normal roommate drama. Now this was something else entirely. So, after that weird little reveal from Emily, things didn't instantly turn into a heartwarming buddy comedy or anything. It was more like holding your breath underwater and hoping you don't surface with bruises, or at least not all in one place. But somehow, the tension hanging between Jake and me started to shift, not with some grand gesture, but through the weirdest team-up I could have ever imagined. It all went down one Sunday afternoon when the landlord, Mr. Dunlop, decided to make a surprise visit. Now, Mr. Steku. Dunlop is that kind of old-school character who shows up unannounced, sporting a hat that looked like it belonged in the 1940s and a walker that beeped like it was about to launch into space. He started off with his usual friendly but nosy small talk, poking around the apartment for maintenance checks, but then his face turned from smile to serious so fast I almost blinked twice. He informed us that there was a sudden plumbing issue, something about the pipes behind the kitchen wall threatening to flood the entire place. He warned us it could get messy and told us not to use any water until he could send someone over. Well, my first thought was, great, now we're stuck here with no running water, just perfect. Jake, usually the one to sulk in silence, surprisingly took charge. We quickly realized the absurdity of the situation. Two guys who barely tolerated each other now had to batten down the hatches together, literally, while Mr. Dunlop went to arrange the plumber. Jake and I darted around the apartment, gathering buckets, towels, and whatever we could find to contain a potential disaster. "Hand me that towel," Jake said without the usual sarcasm. I handed it over and for once didn't feel like he was daring me to drop it or something. When the water started leaking slow at first, then more aggressive, our teamwork turned into this synchronized dance of chaos. I shuffled furniture away from the spreading wet spots, while Jake blocked drains and kept the buckets ready. At one point, a particularly stubborn puddle snuck toward the power outlet, and both of us scrambled to cut the electricity. Honestly, it felt less like two roommate rivals and more like a disaster response team, minus the very real life-threatening danger. After what felt like hours but was really more like 45 minutes of frantic, wet work, the plumber arrived and fixed the problem. Dunlop beamed, clearly impressed that we handled the crisis without making it worse, and honestly, so was I. That day, something shifted between Jake and me. We sat on the soggy couch, dripping but somehow comfortable, sipping cold sodas from the fridge and laughing over the ridiculousness of the whole chaos. The fact that we had actually survived a small domestic submarine situation together broke a wall I hadn't realized was there. It wasn't a friendship forged in fire, but maybe in water damage? Later, Emily pulled me aside, her grin like she'd just seen a plan unfolding just the way she wanted. She spilled the beans, finally, about why she orchestrated this living arrangement with such surgical precision. Apparently, she'd noticed our rivalry hadn't just been about pointless school competitions. She saw that beneath the surface, we shared a lot in common but never got a chance to connect, because history and high school ego built this impenetrable wall. "So," she explained, "I figured if I could shove the two of you into this tiny space and force you to deal with each other, maybe, just maybe, you'd stop seeing each other as enemies." She laughed like it was some foolproof social experiment, adding, "Kind of cruel, I know. But it's working, right?" At first, I was skeptical and maybe a little annoyed. I mean, who wants their personal space invaded by their old nemesis? But the hours of mopping up floodwater had already started reshaping my perspective. I realized Emily's plan wasn't about forcing a friendship on us. It was about breaking down the walls so we could start building something new, whatever that looked like. Now, Jake and I aren't suddenly best friends. We still have our silent battles over whose turn it is to dump the trash or leave the bathroom sink spotless. We definitely still exchange snarks now and then. Old habits die hard. But there's less of that sharp enemy across the room feeling buzzing in the air. For the first time, I'm curious about where this goes. Not because I feel I have to tolerate Jake, but because maybe rivalry doesn't have to come with bitterness attached. So here we are, still figuring it out. Still awkward, still a little weird, but definitely less explosive. And honestly, that feels like progress. I catch myself wondering sometimes if Emily's plan was a little brilliant or just crazy enough to work. Either way, it's clear that this forced closeness has opened up a door neither of us expected. Whether it leads to friendship or just a less thorny truce? Well, I guess that's the story still unfolding. One shared apartment and clumsy step at a time.